The beginning of the book of Genesis has two different creation accounts that directly contradict each other. Hey everybody, I'm Dan McClellan. I'm a scholar of the Bible and religion, and the earlier of the two creation accounts begins in the second half of Genesis 2:4, and it runs to the end of Genesis 3. And this was probably composed somewhere in the 8th or 7th century BCE. And it represents the God of Israel as an anthropomorphic corporeal being who makes noise as they walk around in the evening breeze, and who creates by directly manipulating the soil of the earth. And this deity also does not create everything good from the very beginning. In fact, in Genesis 2, we see the deity create humanity and then say, it is not good, lo tov, that man should be alone. And so then the deity creates animals in search of a suitable companion for the human. The second of the two creation accounts is the one that begins in Genesis 1:1 and runs through to the first half of Genesis 2:4. This was composed later, probably toward the end of the 6th century BCE, and it was composed in response to the earlier creation account and seems to update and revise and improve on the earlier creation account. For instance, this is a more transcendent deity who does not make noise walking around in a garden, but who creates by divine fiat, who creates the animals first and then the humans last, who creates everything good from the very start. It repeatedly states, and God saw that it was good. And so scholars think that this creation account was probably intended to supersede the earlier one, to fix a bunch of theological issues with it, and to supplant it. However, they probably at one point or another got stuck on the same manuscript page for the sake of archival purposes, in order to ensure that neither was lost, and now we read him as one continuous narrative. And people want to imagine that they do not contradict each other, and they have a variety of different ways of getting around the data. For instance, you have translations like the New International Version that render the Vav conversive at the beginning of Genesis 2:19 as a pluperfect, so that God does not create humanity and then begin to create animals, but the text says God created humanity, and then the text says, now God had created the animals from the dust of the ground. And so in that way, you avoid the contradiction of the order of creation. Because Genesis 1 has humanity created last, after the animals. Genesis 2 has humanity created first, before the animals. And when it comes to the other contradictions, people will generally imagine that Genesis 1 is your 30,000-foot view, and then Genesis 2 is zooming in on the sixth creative period or something like that. But that does not work, because it still has the order of creation wrong. It still has God creating something that is lo tov, not good. It still has the creation being something anthropomorphic and corporeal rather than by divine fiat. And there are a bunch of commentaries you can look at. I would recommend Ron Hendel's recent Anchor Yale Bible commentary on Genesis 1 through 11. I would also recommend David Carr's excellent commentary on Genesis 1 through 11 as well, both of which were published in the last 5 or 6 years. But if you don't believe that the Bible contradicts itself, then you are very easy to convince that the Bible doesn't contradict itself. You do not need very robust arguments, because you are intuitively predisposed to accept whatever argument you can convince yourself is reasonable, even if that means retreating to the notion that there can be no contradiction unless there is no logically, physically, humanly possible way for the two different accounts to be harmonized. And as long as you are free to gin up whatever imaginary scenarios that are not in evidence you want in order to connect those dots, there's no such thing as a contradiction. You can harmonize any two accounts as long as you have the liberty to make up whatever data you want. And that's what apologetics does. And so if you are convinced that the Bible does not contradict itself, obviously you will not find it very likely that these two creation accounts contradict themselves. But for everyone who is open to the possibility of contradiction, there's not really a case to make against it for these two creation accounts. Overwhelmingly, scholars are in agreement. They contradict each other. There's not really a plausible way to harmonize the two accounts. And the fit for this video has been Gravity Falls.